Warning: this is only for those who are called to the highest levels of income, influence, and impact. It's an unspoken obligation to a select few, which, when ignored, can throw society into such imbalance that is difficult to quantify. So what we're talking about in this video is a sacred pillar of organized society, which has been relegated for so long and must be reclaimed by all means and at all costs. So this is the general idea of, society, and the way people view society is that there are two ends of the spectrum. There's one which is the government, the provider, right? And this government is saddled with the responsibility of creating policies, creating opportunities, ensuring security for the benefit of the citizens. So the government is responsible for state matters, resource management. It could take the form of autocracy in like a monarchy, dictatorship, whatever it is, or even parliamentary systems and democracy as we know today. And then the other end of the spectrum is the beneficiaries. So we have the provider and we have the beneficiaries. The beneficiaries are the citizens, the residents, who are directly and indirectly affected by the actions and inactions of the government, good or bad. So usually it's about the government being responsible for running the state and the people who are at the mercy of the policies, the actions of the government, good and bad. But there's a third subset of people in society that I want us to talk about, who are in the middle of that spectrum. And those are the people that I call the wealthy. The wealthy. And you can refer to these people as barons. All right. These are people who have, high levels of influence and income in society. They're not exactly royalty like in ages past, or elected officials or things like that, but they are influential enough to be regarded as such in the common consciousness of people. So I'm talking about people with means, people with resources, people with influence enough to make things happen, and they have enough dignity and respect in society to be regarded by the general populace as nobles. So beyond having money, these people have agency, they have leverage at their disposal. All right, there's both undeniable power, and as a consequence, there's great responsibility attached to that. Okay, so, and yes, I definitely believe that being wealthy is a calling with specific responsibilities attached to whoever stewards it. Foundations for impact and influence. So let's take a look at the life of Job. All right, now without going too granular, we can deduce from the description of this man in the book of Job, chapter 1, verses 1 to 3, what it really means to be wealthy. All right, so the first description we see is that of assets. Job had assets. Very clear to see. He says he had 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 pairs of oxen. That means 1,000 oxen, but yoked together. So 500 pairs, and he had 500 donkeys. And if he had oxen, then it means consequently that he had huge farmlands, because the oxen yoked together, it's like the old equivalent of your tractor and your modern farm machinery. So the oxen are yoked together so they can plow the farmland. So if he had 500 pairs, then it means that he had huge farmlands to work with. So that's number one, because that's what yokes are meant for. Number two is he had access to huge leverage. Number one is assets, and number two is leverage. The Bible records that he had a large number of servants. He had a great household, talking about agency, talking about capacity for productivity, capacity for getting stuff done, just because of the huge supply of labor that was under his command. And this is the leverage that the big business owners, CEOs, C-suite executives, founders, and directors of large organizations also have today. Beyond assets and leverage, there's a testimony of the writer of the book of Job concerning this man in verse 1 that he was perfect. And that's the third thing I want to bring out here. Beyond money, beyond leverage, there was a character trait. There was a report that he was blameless and he was perfect. And perfect there didn't mean that he did not make mistakes. It meant that he was complete. So all these things don't complete you. There's something else, a bit unspoken of, internal, that actually makes you complete. And when you check the word complete there or perfect there, it means upright, but it also means blameless. Blameless. All right, that's a key word for me, blameless, because we've established the material status of Job, but looking further into this testimony of the writer in Job chapter 29, we can now uncover a fundamental principle upon which this video is premised. All right, so now we're stretching out the idea of blameless. What does it mean to be blameless, and how can we learn this from the life of Job? So Job starts out by sharing the privileged access and protection that he enjoyed while, according to him, God watched over him. So Job 29:1 says, Moreover, Job continued his parable and said, Oh, that I were as in months past, as in the days when God preserved me, when his candle shined upon my head, and when by his light I walked through darkness, as I was in the days of my youth, when the secret of God was upon my tabernacle, when the Almighty was yet with me. So I'm going to stop there. But basically, he's speaking about a commitment that God had, over his life. That's what that passage talks about. And he mentioned how he dismantled complex problems that we can term to be darkness just by walking in the wisdom that God gave to him. Basically, he spoke about his path being drenched with butter, if you go later in the verses, and rock pouring out streams of olive oil, which actually refers to his business flourishing and growing in leaps and bounds. Right. So we can also see from verse 7 to verse 12 how he would go to the city gate, all right, and take his seat in the public square. This was something that characterized the life of Job. And, he basically had a seat at the table where decisions were made, because judgment usually was made at the gate of the city. So this man had a seat in the Senate. Basically, he had the ear of government. He had, access to realms of power, and he was able to influence decisions in the direction which his wisdom, basically was flowing. All right. Now, we also read that both young and old, had immense respect for him, and how nobles and princes will hush their mouth when he spoke, and just basically how his influence was undeniable. Now, here's the point. Let's go to verse 12, because that's where it's instructional for us here. It starts with the word because. He enjoyed everything that he enjoyed up to this point, created this kind of experience and reality for himself because he got the commitment of God, because he enjoyed protection, influence, and prosperity because. And because what? Because of his deeds that were recorded in the following verses from verse 12. It says, he rescued the poor who cried for help. He was a father to the fatherless. He put his money where his mouth was. He stood for justice and fought for it with his wealth and his influence. He used his resources, position, and influence to ensure fairness, justice, and equity in the city. He was eyes to the blind. He was sought after for illumination and wisdom. So that's what eyes to the blind also means, both literally and figuratively. Right? He gave wisdom, he gave illumination to governors, to people, to business people, to whoever that needed it. So think of government consulting you for wisdom on a particular matter, for policies, wisdom for decision making. It also says that he was feet to the lame. Now, this is true literally, okay? Maybe literally could mean you're helping the lame actually, get crutches, do some funding research for, trauma or injury treatment and things like that, helping people to get their mobility. But it also means feet to the lame. He helped people to get up and get moving. It means that he provided support systems for people to rely on and platforms for the less privileged and the vulnerable in society. Such audacity. Job knew the purpose for wealth. He knew what it was meant for, and he acted as such. So if you have resources and leverage at your disposal, there are commandments that are allotted to you. The requirement to be perfect, the requirement to be blameless. The wealthy must recognize that their place in society and their sacred obligation to be a place of refuge, a buffer, and a support system. It's a requirement to be considered blameless. This is the requirement. All right. We can also look in Isaiah 32, which helps us to connect the dots. This is another scripture that I love so much. Okay, because it paints a clear picture of how you can position yourself in society in order to be considered blameless. There is something which you must do. All right. So kings, people in authority, people in power, CEOs of multinationals, big businesses, billionaires, millionaires, and you too. You must stand up for what is right, and you must put your money, put your leverage, put your resources where your mouth is. So here's what people with means must begin to do. And if you are somebody influential, this is what you must begin to do. Number one, consider and determine what ought to be. And then organize and deploy energy, assets, and leverage your relationships to make it so. That's number one. Number two, beyond getting your second passport, creating insurance for yourself and your family, you must create systems of refuge, all right, shelter for the vulnerable and the less privileged in society who cannot afford a means of escape from the economic storms and the tempest. Number three, build, fund, and sustain certain platforms and structures that uphold important value systems for society. These are three responsibilities for the influential, for the powerful, and for people in positions of power. The audacity of wealth is in recognizing that with great power comes great responsibility and deploying that power for that purpose. All right, understanding that your mark is beyond getting rich. It's not about increasing your storehouse. It's not about multiplying your wealth and becoming the richest person in the world. This is a sacred responsibility that you have to carry out in order to be determined to be blameless, to be perfect, to be complete. So what next? How do you scale your income, your impact, and influence so that you can do more good? Front and center in the Personal Wealth Academy is everything that has to do with optimizing and harnessing resources, nurturing leverage and capital so that you can deploy it to protect, to preserve, and to provide for those who need it. Not just to build a personal legacy, but beyond that, you must do so as a matter of duty. We've learned the power of capitalism from the men who built America, but even though they did it primarily for selfish purposes, the benefits of those exploits still stand today. So if you've been entrusted with riches, with economic leverage, you must make it a duty to do more good. But you must first be wildly successful, consolidate capital, multiply it, all right, nurture and harness leverage, relationships, so that you have you can be in position to fight for justice. You can be in position to do good and to help other people in society. So spare no expense, lengthen your stakes, strengthen the cords, all right, because you are on assignment. There's serious work to be done. So if you are a CEO, a C-suite executive, a founder, maybe a high net worth individual with a net worth of over $10 million, or you have a team, employee strength, partners network of over 100 people working for you or working with you, or if you know somebody like this, send me a direct message. I want to talk to you right away. Nigeria is waiting, Africa is waiting, the global south is waiting, and the world is waiting.